Are millennials and Gen Z really broke, or is that just a myth? Well, I'm here to tell you that the answer is more complicated. If you're a millennial or Gen Zer yourself, you're probably all too familiar with the financial challenges that come with being part of these generations. From student loan debt to stagnant wages to the high cost of living, it can feel like an uphill battle just to make ends meet. But why is this happening? Why are so many young adults struggling to achieve financial stability?
30 states and 4 territories have already increased the minimum wage above federal law. New York is one of those states, and lawmakers have gone a step further, tying future increases to inflation,
putting even more pressure on people who are already feeling the strain from the rising cost of living. So how did we get here? In January 2019, there were over 360,000 properties available to rent. Now it's around 215,000. At the start of 2019, the average rental would set you back £850. Now it's $1,150.
Student loan debt has reached crisis levels, with around 45 million Americans owing over $1.7 trillion in student loans. This burden falls heavily on millennials and Gen Z, who enter adulthood facing rapidly rising college costs. The average debt at graduation is now over $30,000. This debt weighs down millennials and Gen Z's finances, delaying major purchases and life milestones. High monthly payments make it harder to afford a home, start a family, or even pay other bills. Default rates have increased as graduates struggle with unmanageable debt loads. A major driver of the student debt crisis is the skyrocketing cost of college tuition. Compared to the 1970s, the average tuition and fees at public four-year universities have more than tripled when adjusting for inflation. Books, supplies, room and board, and other costs have also ballooned. This forces students to borrow more just to afford a degree, yet earnings for graduates have not kept pace with costs, placing the burden of these increases squarely on the shoulders of young adults. Millennials and Gen Z start their careers weighed down by this debt from simply trying to get an education. While costs have risen, the payoff of some degrees in the job market has declined. Graduates in lower-paying majors often cannot find jobs utilizing their degrees and end up underemployed. Their debt-to-income ratios make loans extremely difficult to repay. This devaluation of degrees affects millennials and Gen Z the most, as they hold the majority of student debt while facing these repayment challenges. It highlights how the rising cost of college has outpaced the earning ability for many recent graduates, further contributing to the student debt crisis. Unlike previous generations, millennials and Gen Z have experienced stagnant wages that have barely kept up with inflation over their working lives. Adjusting for inflation, the median hourly wage for young workers today is approximately the same as it was 30 years ago in the 1990s. While costs of living and student debt have skyrocketed, entry-level salaries and pay raises have not matched pace. This wage stagnation makes it much harder for young adults to afford major expenses and achieve financial stability compared to the past. The rise of the gig economy has impacted millennials and Gen Z's wages as well. While gig work offers flexibility, most jobs pay low hourly wages without benefits. Gig workers are also more susceptible to periods without income between projects. This unpredictable patchwork nature of gig work makes it challenging to earn a stable living or get ahead financially. For many young adults trying to pay off debt or cover regular bills, income volatility poses a major obstacle to overcoming wage stagnation. Beyond low wages, rising living costs eat further into stagnant incomes. For example, young adults today face much higher transportation costs than previous generations did at the same age. According to the Cost of Driving Index, the average cost of owning and operating a vehicle has surged over 40% in the last decade when adjusting for inflation. With stagnant wages, increased driving costs claim a larger chunk of take-home pay for millennials and Gen Z. This leaves less money available for other goals like buying a home, retirement, or starting a family. So between flat pay rates and ballooning expenses, the millennial and Gen Z standard of living has effectively declined despite similar wages on paper. Their money simply does not stretch as far, revealing why stagnant wages are such a burden. The cost of living has dramatically increased in many of America's urban areas, especially on the coasts. For example, median rents in cities like New York, San Francisco, and Boston are over $3,000 per month, more than double the national median. Home prices in these metro areas are similarly astronomical. Other expenses like groceries, utilities, transportation, and childcare are also significantly higher than average in these cities.
Cost of living. food, clothing, utilities.
Many millennials and Gen Z move to urban hubs for jobs, but find the high cost of living consumes a large chunk of their pay. The painfully high cost of living in cities leaves young adults struggling to afford basics like housing and transportation. Over half of millennials spend over 30% of their income just on rent, the threshold for rent being considered unaffordable. Saving for a down payment on a home is extremely difficult when rents sap incomes. Getting around these cities without a car can also drain budgets. Unlimited monthly subway passes in New York City now top $150 per month. Rideshares, taxis, rental cars, and parking all add up fast for urban dwellers on a budget, let alone all the other necessities like groceries, utilities, student loan payments, and healthcare that strain millennials and Gen Z's already thin paychecks in expensive cities. To withstand the pressure of high urban costs, budgeting and frugal living is absolutely critical. Avoiding lifestyle inflation, buying generic brands, minimizing eating out, and limiting impulse purchases helps keep expenses in check. Finding affordable housing farther from city centers and utilizing public transit can significantly cut costs as well. Though urban living is expensive, careful budgeting and prioritizing essentials makes surviving the high cost of living possible. Living below one's means, at least early in their career, helps millennials and Gen Z build savings that enable more choices later. Though budget-conscious urban living can be challenging, it paves the way for financial stability down the road. Millennials and Gen Z have faced major economic downturns at key points in their young adulthood and careers. The Great Recession struck as many millennials were graduating college or starting first jobs. The pandemic similarly disrupted Gen Z as they entered the workforce. These events derailed careers, reduced job opportunities, suppressed wages, and limited millennials and Gen Z's ability to gain financial footing. Their effects linger years later in the form of lower net worth and delayed home ownership and family formation. The financial impacts of recessions often persist for young adults. Those graduating and working during downturns earn less over the next decade compared to peers in better economies. Millennials hit by the Great Recession have had lower job quality, wage growth, and wealth even years later. Gen Z may face similar long-term effects from COVID-19. Entering adulthood during turmoil leaves economic scars. These events also shaped millennials and Gen Z's habits and attitudes. Growing up amid instability has made them more skeptical, pragmatic, and risk-averse financially. Many increasingly reject the debt burdens and overspending of previous generations. The traditional American dream of homeownership, retirement, and providing a better life for one's children is increasingly out of reach for millennials and Gen Z after these economic shocks. Their faith in systems enabling upward mobility has been shaken. Having their dreams thwarted forces these generations to chart new versions of success and community. They are rethinking work, family, and material needs while advocating for student debt relief, affordable housing, healthcare access, and policies supporting financial security. By challenging outdated assumptions, millennials and Gen Z can rebuild an American dream reflecting today's realities. While the picture may seem bleak, there are also reasons for optimism. Millennials' incomes have rebounded, and Gen Z is course-correcting some past mistakes. With careful budgeting and advocacy for better systems, a secure future remains possible. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the financial pressures millennials and Gen Z face, hang in there. Focus on the variables within your control, minimizing expenses, paying off debt, and building emergency savings. Tune out rampant consumerism and comparison culture. Prioritize needs over wants. With intentionality and prudence, you can achieve financial health. Please like this video and share it if you know others struggling with similar financial challenges. Spreading awareness is the first step toward change. Now is the time to come together and support each other in overcoming these obstacles. So what do you feel is the biggest barrier for our generation to achieving financial stability? I am curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you liked this video, then I recommend watching my other video on the future of work and why millennials and Gen X are quiet quitting.